Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Dave with Return of the Vintage. Today I wanted to talk to you about pricing your antique and vintage items on eBay. Now, when it comes to pricing, a lot of people think that it starts when you're creating the eBay listing, when in fact that's not the case. Pricing really starts when you're out and sourcing the item, whether it be at your garage sale or a yard sale, whatever it might be. Pricing really starts then because the more inexpensive that you can buy that item, the more flexibility you're going to have when it comes to go and list that item. And remember, when you're looking to buy the item, think to yourself, can I 2x, can I 3x this with including shipping? Is this something that's going to sit in my storage for a long time? Is it going to take up a lot of space? Time is money as well. Is this something that's going to need to be cleaned? Is this something that might get broken? Those are important things, but just think that pricing really starts when you're initially outsourcing that item. Now, when it comes to pricing and you found what you want to go and list in eBay, it really comes down to a lot of research. So, first, auction or buy it now? That's a big question I get a lot. And for when I first got started, I did everything in auction. And the reason I did it is because I got items really at a low price. And I didn't know what the market was. I didn't know what it would sell for. So for me, it was just easier just to list everything on auction and what it sold for is what it sold for. But over time, I realized that buy it now is really the best way to go. And so I would highly recommend buy it now. I probably do like 95% of my business with buy it now. I'll do auctions from time to time. And I'll usually do those only if it's an item that I paid very little for, couldn't find any markings or any information on it. So I'm comfortable if it sells for a very low amount. But really, for the most part, the problem with auctions is that they're going to be only a certain amount of buyers for rare, vintage, and antique items. And the chances that those people are going to be there during that week or that 10 days that it's listed really isn't worth it. So for me, I really go with buy it now because I know I can price, as long as I do my research, I can price where it needs to be, and then I'll usually have a best offer as well. Now, when it comes to actually finding the information, finding the numbers, eBay is the best resource. It's looking at comparison, we call them comps, looking at comps of what something is currently priced for on eBay, and more importantly, what something has sold for recently or over the last 3 years on eBay. So for me, those are the two first numbers that I look at to get a sense of where the market is for the item now, and then what it sold for recently, but almost more importantly, what is the highest that it sold for? I don't want to post something at a number that's just a little bit over where it sold for now, when in fact it's actually a very high priced item. Someone just priced it at the wrong amount. So for me, what I try to do is I try to get a sense of those three factors: what it's listed for now, what it's sold for just recently, what it sold for most in the past. What I tend to do is when I find a number, I tend to list it a little bit over the one of the most recently sold amounts, and then I provide a best offer there because I'm okay with flexibility. As long as I've done my research, I've bought it at a good amount, I'm comfortable with that in terms of a little bit higher than the most recently sold with a best offer. Now, again, this is where you got to watch out because if you paid too much for your item and you're kind of restricted and you don't necessarily have that flexibility. So that's where it's important to get that item at the right price. But that's my thought on using eBay in terms of finding the most appropriate price. Now, sometimes we find very rare antiques, very rare vintage items, and there aren't comps in eBay over the last 3 years. So I use WorthPoint. WorthPoint's a great service. It's a paid service. It's like $20 a month, but it's more than paid for itself over time. And what it is, it's a separate website that gives you a good 10-year time period, if not more, of what things have sold for. And so that really helps when I have a vintage sign that's not posted, that no one sold recently, or a vintage baseball glove, from the 20s or 10s or whatever it might be. I found all kinds of things that just hadn't sold recently just because no one had found them. So that gives me a sense of what it had sold for in the past, or even if it has. Sometimes if it's not listed and no one's ever bought it, it's not worth listing and not worth buying. But what I then do if I'm looking at worth point, certainly I don't want to go and look at something that sold 10, 15 years ago and use that as my number of choice. What I try to do though is get a sense of at least kind of what it was sold for, And if maybe it was something that was 5 years ago and it sold for a decent amount, taking that into consideration. But those are like the two main points of research that I use outside of just prior knowledge, having sold things. But that just comes with time. Now, a couple things to think about, maybe some takeaways here. Don't price your items emotionally. I know it's easy. Like I've had things I love so much. Like I said, I'm a big hat guy, and I love selling vintage hats. The problem is, if you get emotional about it and you post things at where you think they should be, they're not always going to sell there. You really need to follow the numbers and follow the data. So don't price things at a number you hope it goes for. Do your research, and sell it for what it should go for. Another thing, don't go for the immediate highest price. Because something sold at this certain amount, don't immediately go there because it could have been a one-off, and it could sit for a year or 2 years just because you priced poorly at the very beginning. So don't go right there. Use that as a barometer, but also just think, hey, it's not necessarily always going to go for that highest amount, but use that for consideration, but don't go straight there. And then also, when you think about it, think about how much the item's going to cost, but also shipping on top of it. This is something that's important for larger items. Something may have sold for $500, but it was free shipping. But if you take that number into consideration, you don't want to list something at $500 if its shipping is going to be $35, $40. You have to take that in consideration. So make sure you think about the shipping as well on top of what the actual item cost will be. So that's a little bit in terms of pricing. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer. There's a lot more that goes into it, but I figured this would be kind of like a good overview to get us started with some guidance for new or current resellers of vintage and antique items. My next video will be on actually how to go about listing them on eBay, but hopefully this gave you some good information. Thank you so much. Feel free to give me a follow, and I look forward to talking to you soon.